I don't respect pop culture. I don't really feel like it respects me either, you know? The shit they put out and they, hey, man, here's a pile of dog shit. You like it? It's like, no, I don't. Sorry. But, there is one area of popular expression where I think we're kind of in a renaissance, adult cartoons. No, not those adult cartoons. Jesus fucking Christ. I'm talking about these. I'm talking about cartoons made for adults, not to masturbate to, but to laugh at and be filled with mirth. Today I'll be pitting three great shows in this medium against each other because, if art is about something, it's about competition and being scrutinized and judged by a loudmouth internet jerk-off. BoJack Horseman, Rick and Morty, and F is for Family. As I'm looking at these shows, I'm going to be asking the following questions in order from least important to most important based on my sensibilities and whims. How good does this show look? Is this show pushing boundaries? How funny is this show? How interesting and relatable are the characters? How smart is the show? How emotionally affecting is the show? Those are the categories, folks. And as I said, they're not all equally important, so each round is going to be for a different amount of points. We're going to start off with how good does this show look? And that's going to be worth 5 points. To start, let me make it clear that all of the shows that I've mentioned are well animated with good art direction, so none of them have anything to be ashamed of in this department. F is for Family would rarely be described as visually stunning. I do think, however, that its intro is one of the best in TV history. It perfectly sets the tone for the show and tells you everything you need to know about the central character, Frank Murphy. BoJack Horseman uses surreal visuals on occasion and certainly has an interesting watercolor palette throughout. Despite being set in a world where humans and anthropomorphic animals live side by side, this is the future furries want, by the way. Despite that, it is somewhat grounded in reality, with the most surreal visuals being brought on by drug trips or a character's mental illness. Rick and Morty is a menagerie of monsters and aliens, acid trips, and high-concept sci-fi rigmarole. Rick and Morty can be about anything and set anywhere, from a planet where everyone is controlled by a hive mind, to inside the body of a homeless wino, to a realm of pure toxic negativity, to a computer-simulated wonderland, to a space city populated entirely by Ricks and Mortys. The narrative of Rick and Morty being interstellar and interdimensional travelers on wacky adventures really allows the show to explore a ton of different visual motifs, though the animation style itself does remain consistent as opposed to something like, say, Courage the Cowardly Dog that might mix different animated styles, like here's 2D, here's 3D, here's even a little live action for you. But Rick and Morty has to win this round. I have no doubt that the animators of F is for Family and BoJack Horseman could give Rick and Morty a run for their money, but Rick and Morty's narrative just gives their creators too much of an edge here to surmount. 5 points for Rick and Morty. Next question. Is this show pushing boundaries? This will also be worth 5 points. Now, you might think F is for Family would be at a bit of a disadvantage here, being set in the 70s, but in fact, looking at issues of racism, sexism, and classism through the lens of the past makes the viewer see them perhaps a bit more objectively. It doesn't really feel like it's judging us, it feels like it's judging the past. Politics is really at the root of this show, yet it never really feels like a show about politics. It doesn't seem interested in taking a side as much as it's just showing us a reflection of who we were, and in doing so, it makes a commentary about who we are. The thing that immediately struck me when I first watched the show was just how brutally real it is. The dynamic between all the characters is so authentic and real, and oftentimes it's uncomfortable. Like, Frank is a powder keg of impotent rage. He's seen the American dream as a lie, but part of him still refuses to wake up. He still clings to hope, because what choice does he have?
The point is, that's life, and life has no point. You work hard, you get ahead, you start a family, and the kids don't appreciate you.
Too many people are relying on him for him to give in to despair, but on some level, he feels like those dependent on him are what's really keeping him down in the first place. It's funny, F is for Family is a show that rarely seems overtly political, but the heart of the show is politics. BoJack Horseman is a show that is often overtly political, but the heart of the show is really depression and the emptiness of how we struggle to fight it. Whether that's BoJack's hedonism, Diane's do-gooderism, Todd and Mr. Peanut Butter's relentless naive optimism, or Princess Carolyn's drive towards power and success.
That's the thing. I don't think I believe in deep down. I kind of think all you are is just the things that you do.
Well, that's depressing.
I think that showing characters struggle with depression and other mental issues in an honest and unflinching way is definitely boundary pushing, but ultimately many of the values and sensibilities pushed in BoJack Horseman couldn't be more mainstream. What BoJack Horseman does in giving us an honest look at depression and other mental illness, Rick and Morty does in giving us an honest look at philosophical nihilism. If there's ever been a more nihilistic television show, I've never seen it. The show seems to spit on the very concept of hope and revels in the ultimate meaninglessness of life and all the struggles and hardships that we endure. To Rick Sanchez, life is cheap. Even his own family is disposable. Infinite timelines means infinite iterations of his loved ones to choose from. You destroy the entire world? Whoops. Just find one that's similar and set up shop there. And if that means condemning the family you've lived with up until then to live out the rest of their days in an apocalyptic hellhole, don't think about it. Just sit on the couch and watch some TV. It doesn't matter anyway. Nothing does.
I want to be a regular kid. I want to go to school and throw balls around and masturbate.
F is for Family has to win this category. While I admire BoJack's treatment of mental illness, drug addiction, and the superficialities, hypocrisies, and absurdities of the entertainment industry, their political message is not dissimilar to that of a garden variety Twitter mob. True, they deliver the message through brilliant writing and richly developed characters, but it's still just the same paint-by-numbers social justice do-gooderism that already inundates us from numerous sources. Rick and Morty may be the most nihilistic show ever created, but it's never really generated too much controversy beyond the occasional Szechuan sauce fiasco. F is for Family hasn't generated much controversy either, but that's because it's not as popular as the other two. It's not as strongly in the zeitgeist. And it is pretty subtle and subversive with its politics. It actually pushes identity politics harder than BoJack Horseman does, yet it never feels preachy, like BoJack Horseman sometimes can. And that's what makes it so dangerous and why it deserves to win this category. That's 5 points to F is for Family. Next question. How funny is this show? This will be worth 7 points. BoJack's humor is all over the map. A lot of puns, a lot of wordplay, a lot of tongue twisters, situational humor, observational humor, absurdist humor, farcical humor, sarcastic humor, even some slapstick. It really dips its toe in pretty much every style of comedy. Most of it works really well, but I honestly can't think of a time when I busted a gut watching it. It never had me rolling in the aisles. In other words, while the show has become good at many types of humor, it hasn't really become great at any one type.
You know, I learned something today. Sometimes when you think something isn't about you, you find a way to save the day and in the end realize that it was all along all about you.
F is for Family relies much more heavily on a narrower range of comedic possibilities, mostly situational humor and dark humor. And with a talent like Bill Burr attached to the project, those are both pulled off exquisitely.
Oh, look at that. Fat Albert.
I'm not wearing a costume.
Well, then you don't get any fucking candy.
You really couldn't ask for much better. But once again, Rick and Morty has to win this category. Like BoJack Horseman, it relies on a wide variety of different humor styles, but because there's no limit to the sorts of situations Rick and Morty can find themselves in, there's also no limit to the comedic possibilities that the show can explore. And the jokes, they come fast. One fan's analysis found that on average, Rick and Morty contains 5.4 jokes per minute. If that seems insane to you, that's because it is.
Huh? Is something wrong, Beth?
This is another category where Rick and Morty's premise gives it a clear advantage over the competition. Sure, BoJack can be funny, but it doesn't always feel the need to be. F is for Family can be funny, but it can only explore the comedic possibilities of its mostly grounded universe. Rick and Morty, in contrast, is free to use absolutely any comedic setup they want. So once again, I have to award Rick and Morty 7 points. Next question. How interesting and relatable are the characters? This one is worth 8 points. We're going to limit this examination to the main cast. Supporting characters can be fun, to be sure, but this category is really about seeing what a show does with the characters that it has the most time to develop. And here's a spoiler. Rick and Morty is not winning this category. While I think that Rick is one of the greatest characters ever created for TV, most of the other characters are stereotypical. Morty, an anxiety-riddled teenage boy. Oop, never seen that before. Summer, just embarrassingly stereotypical teenage girl. Jerry is your typical idiot dad trope. And Beth is an emotionally distant, narcissistic alcoholic, which doesn't make her the typical TV mom, to be fair, but it's not like we've never seen that type of character in other media. Don't get me wrong, all of the characters are reasonably well-written and consistent, but they're not blowing you away with their emotional depth and complexity. Even Rick, who is a great character, is not exactly a complex one. He's great because we've never seen a character embody nihilism so completely. We've seen sociopathic characters, but never one whose sociopathy seems so justified by the world created for him. But ultimately, because the universe of Rick and Morty is so complex, the characters are kept a bit basic. Nothing wrong with that. You can't excel in every category. So let's take a look at the two remaining competitors. F is for Family's characters are certainly relatable, from the bitterness of Frank, the desperation of Sue, the naivete and confusion of Kevin, the fretful and traumatized disposition of Bill, and the enterprising and ambitious spirit of Maureen. They're all tied together by the common bond of frustration. Every character in this show has a reason to be frustrated. Frank watched his dreams turn to dust and is trapped in a life he never would have chosen for himself. Sue is similarly trapped in the role of housewife when she wants to be something more. Kevin is trying to pursue his dreams of being a rock star, but finds that he lacks the talent and conviction to achieve them. Bill, he just can't catch a fucking break. And Maureen, as a tomboy, is coming up against a male-dominated world that continuously tries to push her into a box that she resents. These sorts of themes resonate with most of us. Most of us have had to accept the death of at least some of our dreams and ambitions. Most of us have had to put up with situations we found intolerable and people who tried to make us into something we aren't. These are very common concerns that affect people as much today as they did in the 1970s. So let's talk about BoJack. The main characters are BoJack, a miserable hedonist who hates himself because he always does the wrong thing. Diane, a smart but idealistic character who holds others to a high standard of conduct that she herself often fails to live up to. Princess Carolyn, a career-oriented woman, or Cat, I guess, who immerses herself in the business side of show business and is constantly on the go, wheeling and dealing, yet she longs to be a mother. Todd, an asexual dude with a lot of impractical ideas and yet a very broad skill set who seems to constantly get himself into outlandish dilemmas. And Mr. Peanut Butter, a cheerful and immature character who seems to avoid thinking at all costs. While these characters may not be quite as relatable as the ones on F is for Family, they're probably more interesting in and of themselves. And they're all terrifically written in a show that, because it has to work as both a comedy and a drama, devotes a lot more time and energy into its characters than the other two. Ultimately, this battle is between, do you want a show with relatable characters who are kind of interesting, or do you want a show with interesting characters who are kind of relatable? And for me, I think I have to lean slightly towards the latter. It's a narrow margin, but I think BoJack wins this round. 8 points to BoJack Horseman. Next question. How smart is this show? Worth 10 points. I mean, do we even need to discuss this? Everyone knows you need a PhD to even begin to understand Rick and Morty. It's the smartest show of all time, enjoyed only by the finest intellectuals. All right, so let's take a look at these three shows. F is for Family is smart for reasons we've already discussed. It examines identity politics through the lens of the 1970s, thus disarming a lot of contemporary objections to certain viewpoints without sacrificing its ability to commentate on modern life. It's a show about politics and political struggle viewed through the lens of middle America in a bygone era. Its grounded approach to storytelling and characters suits it well here because it can discuss real issues that we all face in a way that seems rooted in fundamental human truth. That makes it a pretty smart show, even if you don't have to be a smart person to enjoy it. BoJack is smart because it takes a side and argues its points well. Though I do think it relies too heavily on straw men to make some of its points. It's more traditionally smart than F is for Family, not really relying on subversion to make its points, but just straight up satire, at which it absolutely excels. Rick and Morty is smart because it not only gives us a world so wide and complex that literally anything is possible, but it exploits the hell out of that premise and never seems to approach it pretentiously. The show definitely has a dichotomy between the sophomoric humor and the sort of primitive characters and the high-concept speculative fiction that permeates nearly every episode. Aliens that reproduce through memories, a theme park where people die for fun because death isn't permanent there, a cable box that gets channels from all across the multiverse, and yes, a brilliant scientist turning himself into a sentient pickle just to avoid seeing a therapist. There's no setup too outlandish for Rick and Morty's creative team, and once again, it gives them a distinctive edge over the competition. So while some fans of Rick and Morty might be about as sharp as a wad of Play-Doh, there's no doubt that the show's boundless imagination is a great intellectual strength. However, the nihilism of the show hurts it a bit here. Compare it to Star Trek: The Next Generation, for example. Like Rick and Morty, the Enterprise was constantly running into alien civilizations with strange customs, and this often led to a moral conundrum of some sort, where the crew had to puzzle out not just how to survive the predicament of the week, but how to do so within the confines of their moral code. Since Rick seemingly has no moral code, this doesn't happen to him. And so a universe that could be full of cool culture clashes and moral conflicts instead just becomes a circus attraction of weird shit for stoners to look at and say, "Whoa, man." But it is some really well-realized weird shit. And in a way, the viewer is supposed to be the Picard here. Rick has no moral dilemmas, but we, the audience, are presented with them constantly. We're the ones who have to decide how we think and feel about what we're seeing because no one is spoon-feeding us a moral. When we are presented with morals, they're often totally at odds with what contemporary society thinks. Ultimately, I think Rick and Morty has to win this category. It's not a show you need a PhD to understand, and anyone who thinks that they're smart just because they enjoy it is a twat, but that doesn't change the fact that it is a smart show with a lot of imagination and a willingness to confront the perceptions of its own audience. Rick and Morty gets 10 points. Final question, also worth 10 points. How emotionally affecting is this show? For those of you keeping score, yes, this is now pretty pointless because Rick and Morty has already won the whole shebang. Sorry for the lack of suspense. But you can still wonder about who gets second place. Well, actually, I'm not going to make you wonder long. It's BoJack Horseman. It would have to be. It's the only one of these shows that works just as well as a drama as it does as a comedy. In fact, it may actually work better as a drama. I'm serious. If you took out every joke and just focused on the conflicts of the characters in a serious way, this would still be a good show. It probably would have been canceled after one season and forgotten about, but it would have been a hell of a season. BoJack puts extraordinary effort into developing its characters, and as a result, even though they're not exactly relatable to most of us in a superficial way, they're stunningly real and deep and complex and all those other words that we use to praise great, well-developed characters. And these great characters are given rich, often heartbreaking stories to stretch out in. If you've never watched the show, just check out the episodes Time's Arrow or Free Churro to be blown away by how good this show is. And if you're prone to feelings, you might even catch a tear or two rolling down your cheek. As much as I love Rick and Morty and F is for Family, they're not touching that. Drama for them is an occasional little detour. They're not bad at it. They can pull it off, but it's not their bread and butter. BoJack doesn't use drama as a punctuation mark. It's a driving force. Drama is not the detour there. It's the main road. And so the final score is Rick and Morty, 22, BoJack Horseman, 18, F is for Family, 5. I feel pretty comfortable with that score overall. I do think that, if I was going to rate all of these shows, I don't think F is for Family is like 1/4 as good a show as Rick and Morty and BoJack Horseman. I think it should be a little bit closer, But in the categories I chose, the only one it could really dominate in was that boundary pushing category, which is not a really strong category. But, all overall, if I was just going to rate these shows off the top of my head, Rick and Morty be like a 9, BoJack Horseman be like an 8.5, and F is for Family be like a 7.5. So if you want a sort of a gut thing outside of my little stupid, meaningless scoring system that I developed for this. Of course, by the way, this is all subjective. You can approach these shows with a totally different set of sensibilities, and you can arrive at totally different conclusions. That's the great thing about art. No two people view the same piece of art the same way. And you could feel free to share your thoughts and feelings with me below. If you want to tell me Rick and Morty fucking sucks, BoJack is life, or you want to say, fuck you, all these shows suck, Metalocalypse is where it's at, or Venture Brothers is where it's at, or it's here, it's there. I don't care. Rock on. I do care. I want to hear it. But I'm just saying I don't care what you want to say down below in that comment section. Just keep it on topic. That's the main thing I ask. I also urge you to subscribe to this channel and to my podcast, Deep Fat Fried. We always love getting new subscribers over there. And thank you. And as Rick might say, but I don't think he's ever said, have a meaningless day.